Hi everybody and welcome to Tech Talk. My name is Anu. My guest today is Willem Jonker. He is CEO of an organization called EIT Digital. Come join me. Hi Willem.
Hi Anu.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me here.
Of course. So you are CEO of a company called EIT Digital. EIT Digital stands for European Institute of Innovation and Technology. EIT Digital was founded in 2009 to accelerate digital innovation to promote economic growth and societal development. And 9 years later, you guys are like the industry leader when it comes to making this big digital transformation movement across Europe. You have locations in 9 countries throughout Europe, and you also have a Silicon Valley presence by way of your San Francisco office. Your mission is to drive tech innovation, and you do that by various forms of activities like innovation and education. Tell me more about this.
Yeah, that's actually correct what you're saying. So I think if you look at our organization, you could say you look into the future of innovation. And the future innovation is all about ecosystems, bringing people together, different stakeholders, and making sure they connect, but work also towards very concrete common goals of having impact, economic impact, but also societal impact. And the ingredients you mentioned are key. So the key ingredients are a strong focus on technology, and Europe is really a technological powerhouse. However, at the same time, we observe that this technology that is in our universities, this great talents that we have in our very strong education system, does not always lead to a strong global impact when it comes to global markets. And especially in digital, this is the case, as you can observe. It's our mission to help get Europe really more impactful in the digital world.
Sure. So how many companies are part of your accelerator program?
So indeed, I mean, the activities that we run is we are focusing on creating ventures, and that's actually by extracting technology out of our network, combining with the right entrepreneurs, make sure there is the seed funding and get these companies established. So that's one part of our activities. And next to it, we do have a accelerator. And the accelerator is really focusing on scaling up. It's focusing on growth. And we have had up till now about 150 companies in our accelerator. And we help them with access to market. Of course, we also coach them, and with access to finance. For example, since 2012, we have raised for our portfolio more than 300 million euros investment money.
Wow.
From the private sector.
Yeah.
So that's not a public investment, but really the private investment. And that's actually the way we work. We are a public-private partnership. We use the public part to facilitate the ecosystem, but we rely on the private part for the investments.
Okay. And is there a specific sector focus that is a great sector focus for the companies in the accelerator?
Yes, we are actually working in 5 different areas. Of course, one area is the core digital infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that's about artificial intelligence, it's about cybersecurity, it's about next generation networks, 5G, IoT, you know all the terms. And then we have 4 areas that we have selected very carefully that are strategic for Europe and where we see really a good opportunity for Europe to increase its impact. One area is digital industry. So the transformation of our industry by a wide-scale deployment of all kinds of digital technologies is only at its beginning. And we will see a real transformation of the industry with all kinds of impacts, societal impacts, economic impacts. So that's a strategic focus. Europe has a very strong industry. It has regions which are really industrial powerhouses, like in Germany, the north of Italy, in France, the Nordics. So we have several places where we are very strong there. And it's all about blending. It's about blending digital technology into physical production.
Sure.
So that's one strong focus. The other focus is all about health. So, and our angle on that is move from repair to prevent. Right? So the focus is very much on monitoring, observing, early detection, and that's the second big area. The third one is about digital cities. And European cities are very special. And that's probably also the reason why I attract tourists from all over the place. But here we are looking more at the history, which of course is an asset, but it also poses its specific problems when it comes to growing cities, mobility in the city, making sure that the city is inclusive, that the city is really a convenient place to live, and that people like to be in the city. And digital technology can help a lot there. But it's also about making sure that pollution in the city is monitored, controlled. It also makes sure that if there is disaster management in the city, that you can respond in a quick way, that you have the services being very flexible. So that's actually the focus of our digital city activities. And then the final one, which is a bit emerging area, that's about digital finance, because also there is a big transition going on. And actually this week we had a Dutch company, Adyen, which did its IPO, and it's a very strong financial player, strong technology, emerged from Europe, does its IPO in Amsterdam.
Oh, wow.
So we can do this,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. That's exciting. Yeah. So historically, in past years, Europe's primary focus has sort of been on research and development. And now, today, it's all about bringing that research and development out to market. Touch on the big impact across Europe as a result of this.
Yeah, so the first thing what you see is that there is a strong focus in many countries in Europe on entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
I mean, entrepreneurship in Europe is cool,
Yeah.
right? It was, when I was young, it was cool to play in the band.
Yeah, right.
I never did it, but it
Yeah.
was cool. And today it's very cool to be in a startup, to start your own company, and to be an entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
And you see that happening in Berlin, you see that happening in Paris big time, you see that happening in the Nordics, you see that happening in the Netherlands, and you see that happening in London. So it's really all over Europe. But also in emerging countries like in Eastern Europe, you see an increased activity when it comes to accelerators, universities that connect with industry. I had a discussion with the Prime Minister of Portugal just here because he was visiting Silicon Valley, and you see an enormous investment in those countries as well. So it's all over Europe. The importance of entrepreneurship is really understood, and not only understood, but it's also invested in, and we are able to attract talents. I mean, we see it, we have our education programs, we are able to attract very, very good talented students from all over the world into our education programs, in our network, which is in Berlin, which is in Stockholm, which is in Helsinki, which is in London, Amsterdam, Milan, Madrid. These people are really very enthusiastic to come in Europe, and they also stay.
Right.
I have a very, very nice story actually there of a Chinese student. For me, this is really a role model, what we like to see. So he decided to come to our program, although he had competing offers, and we could not give him the financial scholarship level that others do. But he nevertheless came to us because he was convinced that the way we run innovation, it's really, really future oriented. A network, an ecosystem connecting, and the richness of Europe, right? So he did his first master year in Paris, and he got infected by what's going on there. It's really very vibrant. And then the second year was in Berlin, which is another, of course, hotspot of entrepreneurship. And then he decided, I want to stay in Europe. I want to stay in Europe. So he created his company. And that's exactly what we like to see. And he did grow his company very fast, actually. So in 2 years, after 2 years, he was approached by an American company to acquire his company.
Oh,
and it was several millions, right? He was offered. You know what he did? He said no. And he's now just enrolled in our accelerator with our help to scale. So for me, I mean, this is great. This gentleman comes from China.
Yeah.
Is really very enthusiastic in Europe.
Yeah.
really resist the American temptation and build his future with a European organization.
Right, right.
That's for me really what we are all about.
So that brings me to my question. How does one become a part of the accelerator program?
There's actually several ways of getting into the accelerator. So the main way of getting there is as a result of our active scanning of the startup network. We are in many countries. We have offices in 9 countries, but we also have outreach into other European countries, and we actively monitor the startup scene. We do this together with national startup organizations, but also with European ones, and we have on our radar, I think, about 10,000 startups. Okay, and that's our main sourcing. But then, of course, from a startup to a scale-up is a big step.
Yeah.
So in order to become a scale-up from a startup, you have to satisfy a number of criteria. And of course there are criteria like you have to have a first product, you have to have your first customers, you have to have a certain team size, you have to have first experience with some internationalization. And based on that, we filter and we monitor continuously, and we have a stage-gated process. So if you pass all those gates, then you finally offered to enter the accelerator. So that's actually the main way of entering. At the same time, we also run our challenge, and actually it's about to close now, where we just have a challenge. Everybody can apply, and of course we have a strong jury and so on, and there we select a couple of finalists, and we offer them positions into the accelerator. So that's another stream. And then there is, of course, there's always some ad hoc situations where you just more or less by coincidence come across interesting ones, or they are via our network specifically pointed at and so on. So there's also a certain element of randomness in it when it comes to the selection process. But you should have that. Because I mean, innovation is not a programmable thing. So you should allow for these things as well.
Right, right. Are there cultural differences between the startup scene within the different countries in Europe?
Well, at first sight, you would be inclined to say yes, because one of the richness of Europe is its diversity when it comes to the different cultures. However, not really. Not really, actually. You see an enormous difference in the size and the amount of startups that you and there are clear centers where things come together. But I would say I don't really see a big difference between a German startup or a French startup or a UK startup. Sometimes the topics are a little bit related to the country, but that has to do where is the industrial focus of such a country. So financial services you find more in London. I mean, big industry things you find more in Munich. Okay, that's the kind of things you observe, but not really that it's really very. But maybe that's also what we are doing. It's our focus is really on melting, mixing. That means that in a lot of these startups you see different nationalities, especially in places like Germany, but also in Paris, Italy to some extent, London, big time, also the Nordics. So you see a mix of nationalities in those startups. So I wouldn't say it's a Finnish startup is really different from an Italian startup. No, not really actually.
Right. Okay. What brings you to Silicon Valley?
That's a good question, because that's a question I get very often. Willem, I mean, hey, EIT Digital is a European organization, and to our knowledge, Silicon Valley is not in Europe, right? For digital technology, I think the answer is obvious, right? I mean, Silicon Valley is really a cradle of digital innovation. You have to be connected, but you don't only need to be connected, you have to be on the ground. I mean, we have a small team here, and it's really a hub, it's a bridge, it's a connect. We have people from Europe coming here, but we need people on the ground that are very well connected to the network here. And that takes time. I mean, we're out here now for a little bit more than 3 years, and you see that our relationships are intensifying. As people recognize you, it's something you do not achieve by just visiting a couple of times a year. I mean, you will never connect to the network. You will always be somebody who is visiting, the traveler who is passing by. So that's why we are here, and I mean, it really pays off. If you see what we are doing is, I mean, I just this week signed a contract with UC Berkeley to have the first transatlantic cybersecurity executive education program set up. And that's partly executed here in the Valley with Berkeley and partly executed in Europe with our university partners over there.
I see.
Congratulations! Thanks a lot.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I'm very happy we were able to get that done. But you need to create trust, a trusted relationship. I mean, this doesn't come in a week or whatever. I mean, you have to trust each other. We did a couple of activities together. We had an innovation activity with the Citrus Institute. We worked together with PhD students in the ICSI Institute in Berkeley. And you see, you build a relationship.
Building a relationship,
you build a trust relationship and build on that trust relationship. Then you can achieve this thing. And another very important thing is our relationship with Coursera, which actually is now going on for a couple of years as well. And we bring our MOOCs via Coursera. And that has turned out to be very attractive because we have more than 100,000 active learners on our modules. And it helps us enormously to become known as a strong education brand.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's in the education domain. And the other part, of course, I mean, if you want to know how investment works, if you want to know how you do due diligence, if you want to know how to scale companies, I mean, this is the place to be. So connecting to that ecosystem, having the experts there, having their opinion also onto our portfolio that is in you. And of course, sometimes we bring startups as well. But there we are very, very, very selective to bring our scale-ups over here. I mean, what you see happening a little bit, and maybe a bit on a critical note, if I go to CES, I see hundreds of startups flying into Hull. I'm not sure it's the most effective way to go there. I think also there, I mean, you need to have the network, and decisions are not taken on a exhibition floor. Decisions are taken to have trusted investors, to build these trust relationships, and I think that is where we are focusing on, building trusted relationships here in the Valley. And for that, you need people. You don't need many people, and you have to have a consistent approach.
Right.
Yeah. People want you to be reliable. Okay, if you promise, you do it. If you can't do it, you're honest about it. Yeah. And that works very well. And for me, it's always a pleasure to be here because it's a vibrant environment. Although I must say, I mean, if I'm in Berlin, I get as much energy. If I'm at Station F in Paris, I mean, it's starting to get comparable.
Sure.
But still, I mean, the size here is of course not comparable to any of the single hubs in Europe. But that's why we are connecting them, right?
Yeah.
And we don't try to copy Silicon Valley because I mean that would be a crazy idea. But of course, we try to learn and apply it in the context that is relevant in Europe. At the same time, you see that we also more and more starting to look at Asia. Because if you look at China, what's going on there, I mean, in my former life as a Philips employee, I had people working in Shanghai, and I'm always impressed when I'm in China, the speed with things go. So I think there is a serious development of a new cradle of innovation, and you see really big players. And of course, China has an enormous home market, and that's a little bit where Europe is suffering, right? I mean, we're working on a digital single market. Nevertheless, in many cases, things are very fragmented. There's national regulation, which makes it difficult to scale. You have the language issues sometimes, especially when you have, of course, consumer products that have wide use. So there's all kind of things that we have to work on very hard. Because, I mean, we are a powerhouse, right? I mean, we have 500 million consumers in Europe that are very well connected. We have very good digital infrastructure, and we should make sure that this acts more as a market. And that's, from the market perspective, that's very important. I mean, technology comes from individual regions and sometimes from individuals.
Yeah.
But a market, of course, needs to have a certain size to be impactful.
So, Willem, I'm going to pivot the conversation here. I'd like to talk about you specifically. You have strong roots in academics. You've studied mathematics, and you are a professor of computer science. What was your path to making it as a CEO?
Yeah, that's something I sometimes look back as well, and I never planned my career actually. So it's more looking back and seeing, hey, what happened. So yeah, I mean, I started off as a mathematician, and I think it brought a lot. I mean, it allows you to analyze, to follow complex reasoning, do things in your end, and also shift between a more strategic way of dealing with things into the detail and translating strategy into operation. And I think if you look back, I mean, I never, of course, looked forward that way, but if you look back, what you have to do as a CEO, of course, you need these kind of skills. You need to be able to define a strategy. But at the same time, I mean, the plan is nice, but the execution of the plan is what in the end makes the difference, right? So you have to be able to translate that and shift in these abstraction layers. And well, the sum of abstraction, I would say, is mathematics, right?
Yeah.
So that in hindsight is maybe something where you could say, okay, yeah, there you picked up skills that help now in being a CEO. The reason why I ended up in computer science it was quite a hype in those days. I mean, when I started to do my PhD, artificial intelligence was as much a hype as today.
Yeah.
That was then also the area I went for. And I did the more mathematical part of it, the modeling, the reasoning, algorithms, and what have you. And then, of course, in this period, digital technology was emerging. My first programs, I went with a card deck into a huge machine, and you handed them in, and then you got the listing back and said 1 + 1 = 3. Yeah. I must have made a mistake, and then you had to go back, scratch the cards, and the next day you had 1 + 1 = 2. Yeah. Today we have it in our smartphone. So I mean, that is actually and that, of course, there were so many opportunities, so many things going on that I was in that area. I still teach a bit on the side, and for me it's really important to work with students, to coach and mentor them, and so on, and to have the fresh ideas coming up all the time. But on my career path, I ended up in major industries. So I worked at Philips, and gradually what very often happens is that you then gradually move from being a researcher to being a department manager, to being a sector manager, to be a vice president, and then you get more the strategic elements into it as well. And then actually, this opportunity for EIT Digital came along. I was headhunted by Egon Zehnder, and I could not have planned it because the organization didn't exist. I mean, the way of working together, it's a very funny organization from a certain perspective. On the one hand, we're a multinational because we're all over the place, and at the same time, we're a startup because we have a very agile, small, thin hierarchy layer, and we work very connected. That's actually nothing you can plan for. Yeah. So if you look back, the way I look at these things is that then people say, oh, you're lucky you ended up there, right? And that made me reflect a little bit on the definition of luck. What is luck? Right. And I think luck has two components. It has the component of preparation, and it has the component of opportunity. And for me, luck is where preparation meets opportunity. Yeah. The opportunity part is not in your hand. The preparation part is. So if you're not lucky, there's two things you can say. You can say, well, I never get the opportunity, or, hey, if I reflect, was I really prepared? Right. And I think in hindsight, I did a lot of things that had to do with this prepare. I mean, I've always been very internationally oriented. I've always been interested in the impact of technology and not just on the development of technology itself. Education, training, teaching is something that I like. So, and yeah, that brought me the skills and the experience that was relevant when the opportunity of becoming the CEO of EIT Digital was there. And then it's of course up to other people to make the judgment. And they gave me the opportunity, and I must say, I mean, it's really a great job. It's really a great job. You have a clear mission. I mean, you're doing something which is contributing to the continent. It's about talent. It's about having societal impact. Of course, it's also about business, right? And it's also about European values, bringing European values to the digital world. I mean, we had this whole discussion on GDPR, privacy. I think that's a great example of bringing European values into the digital world. And it's a very impactful thing that Europe has been able to do. And European values are different from Asian values, are different from US values. And these values have to connect, and you have to find an understanding between those values. And if the European values are missing, there's a hole. Yeah. And that is just, if you look at the world, and if you look at the fact there are 500 million people living there, then those should be connected as other parts of the world. And that gives energy to be allowed to work on that.
You're clearly so excited, and you exude energy. You love what you do, and it's just so obvious and apparent. And that's very exciting. All that you're doing is so exciting. I'd like to talk about your childhood. What was that like?
Completely different.
And then wait a second, and then compare your childhood to where you are today.
I grew up in a small village in the north of the Netherlands. And if I have to put a label on it, that would be isolation. Isolation. Perfect isolation.
Perfect isolation.
Also in the sense that it was a perfect life. I mean, it was small, you knew the people. My father worked in the factory that was next to where we lived, and the school was just around the corner. Yeah. It was a small world. But enjoyable. I mean, I really enjoy it. And if I compare to today, I mean, I'm traveling all over Europe. My office is a plane, and I meet a lot of people. So from that perspective, it's complete different world. And the transition I see is actually from a rather structured world. Of course, as a child, you face the world in a different way, but from a rather structured world to a hyper-connected society where we are now. And I think if I had to put a label here today, it's hyper-connectivity is one thing, and the other thing is blending. So many things at the same time, work, private, it's very fluid. This mobile phone is which drags you completely into parallel worlds. I mean, how often do you enter a restaurant where people are supposed to have a nice evening together, and you see them looking and connecting to another world at the same time, blending, you know? So I think that's the big changes. I think I was 15 years old when we got a landline, a phone. 11, 15
Amazing,
years before we were. That has been an enormous change. And if I compare my own education to what I see, what we now offer to our students, it's also enormous difference. I mean, as you mentioned, I studied mathematics, and it was just about mathematics. I mean, the courses were about mathematics, and the lectures were about giving proofs. You know, I mean,
Right.
And now you see that entrepreneurship is very important. Impact of the technology is an element that is broadening connectivity. I mean, we try to move people around as much as possible. The master school means 1 year in OneNote. The second year of your master school, you do in another node in our network. So you really are moved around. So it's connecting, opening up, and so on. And I think that's for me, the big thing: opening up, connecting But I like to go back there from time to time.
Yeah.
My father still lives there, so that brings me there. My brother lives there,
right.
but the rest is my sons are in a different part of the country. But it's the area still has, of course, this source of joy, youth. That is still around, but enormously different.
Yeah. So what would you say is your best advice to the students at the education program at EIT Digital?
Yeah, when it comes to advice, I'm always a little bit careful, to be honest.
Yeah.
Maybe the best advice is to listen to yourself, right? I mean, it's very important that you do things that fit to who you are. That would be my main advice. I mean, find out who you are and do things that fit, and that, because then you will be effective, then you will enjoy it, and you will broaden and you will develop. If you try to do things because people advise you to do it, but they don't fit, it's
right.
For me, it doesn't work, at least. So that is my advice. But they get many advices, so pick the best ones, but stay with yourself. I think that's very important. So
be true to yourself.
Be really true to yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's the heart of it. And of course, the other thing has to do with luck. My definition of luck, which I said before, and that means be prepared. Right. Be prepared in a broad way. So make sure that you broaden yourself. You're not too narrow, not too broad that you lose your depth. Yeah. So it's finding a good balance of being broad enough to have multiple opportunities, and at the same time not losing the depth and be so shallow that you have many opportunities. But when it then comes to it, people will say, okay, but you would require just a couple of additional skills that you don't have. So and that's a balancing act. So the word balance is something that I really that's close to my heart. It's balance in many things. So try to find a balanced life in many ways, and indeed true to yourself.
Sure. Willem, thanks so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure having you here, and certainly hope to see more of you again in the future. Thank you. Folks, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.